Hello, in this video, I'm going to tell you all about the spleen. So first, I'll talk a little bit about the anatomy of the spleen, so the structure. Then I'll talk a little bit about white pulp and red pulp that largely make up the spleen. And then finally, I'll get into the functions, so the physiology of the spleen. So anatomy. So the spleen is the largest mass of lymphatic tissue in the body. It's located between the stomach and the diaphragm. So if we look in this picture here, you'll see it's just kind of squeezed in, tucked in up here next to the stomach, just inferior to the diaphragm. It's covered in a capsule of dense connective tissue because it's strong and it keeps it safe and protected. So the spleen contains white pulp and red pulp, which I will discuss on the next slide. So white pulp, I know these are kind of gross terms in anatomy. They name a lot of certain things pretty grossly. But yeah, white pulp is the lymphatic tissue that consists of lymphocytes and macrophages. So lymphocytes meaning B cells, T cells, and natural killer cells, and macrophages meaning they were monocytes, which is a type of leukocyte that differentiates and becomes a macrophage. So macrophages are like Pac-Man cells. So they're like big cells that go around and gobble stuff up. So they clean up pathogens and debris and anything that needs to go away. They take them into their own cell body and digest them internally. So that's what macrophages do. So the white pulp is made up of lymphocytes and macrophages, so immune cells. Red pulp consists of blood-filled venous sinuses. So any sinus really just means a large space. So they're basically like venous spaces. So it's filled with blood. And cords of splenic tissue. So the red pulp is made up mostly of erythrocytes, so red blood cells. That's what makes it red. Macrophages, again, like we just talked about. Lymphocytes, again. Plasma cells. Plasma cells, that's just a fancy name for a B cell that has differentiated. So a B cell that is no longer naive, a naive B cell is one that has not yet met the pathogen that it's going to spend its life destroying. And when it does, when it meets a pathogen and says, yes, I'm going to kill this thing for the rest of my life, that means it differentiated. And then at that point, we would call it a plasma cell. So that's all that means. And then granular leukocytes, which really just refers to basophils, neutrophils, and eosinophils. If we look at our picture over here, you can see these are the 5 types of leukocytes. So lymphocyte, monocyte, basophil, neutrophil, and eosinophil. The 3 granular ones, it just refers to them having like little pockets of enzymes and fluids and things inside the cell membrane that they can secrete. That's what makes them granular. The agranular ones just means that they don't have that inside. So essentially, the blood comes in, it goes through the white pulp. So it's basically going through this big immune filter to clean out any pathogens or old debris or things that we need to clean out. And then it goes to the red pulp. So let's talk about the function. So like I just said, blood flows into the spleen. It goes through the splenic artery and goes right into the white pulp where our B cells and T cells are able to carry out immune responses against, whatever pathogen might be in the blood. Then we also have macrophages present, the big Pac-Man cells that are there to also destroy pathogens or anything that needs to be dissolved. And then the red pulp is more related to our blood cells rather than being just an immune filter. So the macrophages remove worn out or defective blood cells and platelets. So remember, the macrophages are part of both the white and the red pulp. So they're there to destroy pathogens, but also to break down old red blood cells, because red blood cells, they go through a lot of wear and tear as they're squeezing through tiny little vessels and doing all sorts of stuff in the body. So they get worn out and then they need to be removed from circulation. So they'll be broken down and then we can recycle the parts, or sometimes we need to simply excrete the parts. They also remove worn out or defective platelets, or if our platelet count is higher than it needs to be, then the spleen will actually store up to 1/3 of the body's supply of platelets for later. Because if the platelets are in good working order, but the problem is just that we have too many, it makes more sense to pull them out of circulation and store them so that we can put them back into circulation when we need them, rather than to destroy them completely, because that would be wasteful. So the spleen stores those, and it helps with our platelet homeostasis to make sure that we maintain the appropriate number of platelets in the blood. Also, the spleen produces blood cells during fetal life. So after we're born, our red bone marrow is responsible for that task, but up until then, the spleen is producing our blood cells. All right, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a great day.